I'm still, I'm still struck by our geographic reach. I think it's a miracle. We sort of take it for granted, and yet it's amazing, absolutely amazing, and that we can, communicate across these great distances. What today is about is continuing the work we've been doing on Scriptlines, but expanding that. What I want to do today is look at something that was in Gestalt therapy when I did it way back, which we'll call straight messages. It was a time, I guess, influenced by Maslow and his concept of authenticity, and very much came into the Gestalt movement of really being opposed to manipulation and all manipulation entailed. And there was a book written then that was, very, very widely read and influenced, called Man the Manipulator by, can't remember the author, but he was a Gestalt person. And Janet Letterman, who was my teacher of Gestalt therapy after Fritz Perls died, and really who gave me my initial recognition and confidence. More about that in a moment. Janet developed the concept of straight messages. Her background was not as a therapist or psychotherapist or social worker. Her background was in teaching. And she and a man called George Brown from the University of California at Santa Barbara, the education department, really took Gestalt into education. And they were both very strong teachers and very strong, pardon me, practitioners. So they had a lot of influence and gave Fritz Perls a lot of support towards the end of his life. And particularly because of Janet, Fritz Perls developed a concept that he called a Gestaltist. And you didn't have to have a background in psychology or social work to be a Gestalt therapist, because you could be a Gestaltist. And at the end of his life, he wanted that category to be equal to Gestalt therapist. Just the same as Freud at the end of his life developed a category called lay analyst. And he wanted people to be able to be psychoanalysts who didn't have a background in, who weren't doctors, put it simply. Both of them lost those fights. As soon as they died, the universities took over and put down, you had to have this qualification, that qualification, etc. But the concept of gestaltist and lay analyst, very sort of influential on Pellin and my concept of developing two strands, official and unofficial. But so that's Janet's background. She developed a concept called straight messages, and it's simply truth. Straight messages simply saying to someone what you think or believe in a simple, straightforward way. But her point of view is we don't sufficiently have or deliver straight messages. And it became, and she developed the point of view that the most important thing children need are straight messages, as against mixed messages. And she even said that children need straight messages more than they need love. If children get straight messages, they'll survive, they'll do well. So it was a major part of her work, major part of my work at one time. I guess straight messages led in a different way to transparency. Janet's work was with kids and their parents, essentially. So she came from a different place, but Janet herself was not that good with straight messages. Because like all the other senior people around Fitch Pearls and around Gestalt therapy, and what I believe goes back to Freud, they were not good at being transparent. In fact, Freud was insistent, and from my point of view, if I'm being rhetorical, I would say was obsessive about being closed, and developed a whole theory that you needed to be closed and you needed not to say who you were. And I don't
Peter,
think
can you repeat who you said, whose body of work was that?
Sorry?
That you just whose body of work about being closed did you just reference?
Oh, Freud.
Oh, Freud. Oh, Lord. I thought it was somebody new. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, going all the way back to Freud.
Yes, absolutely.
And I feel, certainly your point of view, Nikki, people don't do their own work. And I don't think Freud did his own work. And he developed, he was a very powerful intellect and made huge contributions. I do not deny that. But he set up a framework, a set of rules, I think I'll call them that, which would come to affect me at crucial times in my career. Before I met Dave, before I met Fred, before I knew really much at all about AA, I was told I had it wrong. Not only was I told I had it wrong, but at times what I was doing, let me go back, was unethical. It was meeting my own needs. It wasn't meeting the needs of a client. You've got to put yourself aside, or, you've got to be something called objective, quote unquote. your the elements of your character and personality should not come into this relationship from the side of the practitioner who's supposed to be a blank screen. Now that all came from Freud and his very powerful personality in being influential, and putting that argument in a Pellin context, I would say, the truth line around the nature of the helping relationship, we only claim to have a little bit of it. A little bit of it is about transparency. But we feel strongly that transparency is a good idea. So, the reason I'm putting that in here is that I was attacked a lot, that simple. Because I'd had the experience in prisons, I couldn't that easily be dismissed. If you've worked in prison, you can't quite be accused of touchy-feely stuff, which is one of the criticisms of the Gestalt therapy and what are called the experiential ways of doing this sort of work. Let alone the practitioner being actively and openly involved in what the therapeutic relationship is. That was not acceptable. And so I want to go back, and Janet and Fritz were influenced by that. I developed something that was quite different. I knew it was different. I got attacked. And then I did enough reading to have the listening of people that I claim supported my approach, Martin Buber and Maslow and Carl Rogers at the end of his life, William James, E.M. Forster. I just rolled them off my tongue. And then later, when I became more knowledgeable about AA, I could roll off all those heavyweight intellectual figures and then say, and Alcoholics Anonymous, okay. So I became comfortable with my approach. I was sort of left alone. And, I guess, the conventional approach and the humanistic approach part of company in any way. So, I guess it got to the point where the humanistic practitioners and the Freudian practitioners knew they didn't like each other, so they didn't have anything to do with each other. But there was still the occasional shot at me. Oh, Peter Fleming, how'd it go? Peter Pellin's great with self-development, but they don't understand boundaries and countertransference. Therefore, we dismiss them.
But if they read the parameters that you clearly identify about transparency, it would very much, I was trained in the 70s by psychoanalysts. They were very transparent about their countertransference in the training environment, but did not get translated into the therapeutic environment.
Yeah.
But if people read the parameters that you clearly lay in place, I think they would understand the freedom it gives you not just as a human, but as a practitioner, because you can move in and out of your levels of transparency with ease.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I had some support and some recognition from that point of view.
But your language is far more precise than I think is given credit.
Thank you. Thank you.
But it's true. I mean, you know me, I would tell you if I thought it's, and in fact, I'm working on, you know, on trying to articulate that as I train these peers. So anyway, that's, but I think it's, and very much in line, Peter, with the evolution of the field in general. You just happen to be before your time.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for that, man. And then, you know, I got a lot of support or ease, I'll put it, when I had some of it working with people in substance abuse and through your counsel, you know, Addictive Services of Counsel in Cincinnati, some work in elsewhere with people working in substance abuse. And then, of course, the involvement with AA, the more intense involvement with AA. And then I started to say that the most important, you know, publicly, openly, in almost any training situation, I would say this is not a Pellin statement, it's a personal statement, but the most important sentence for me in my field of work is, I'm Bill, I'm an alcoholic. Which is, and presenting that in a humanistic context, I'm Bill, I'm a human being. You know, rather than I'm Bill, I'm the founder of this great organization. And the bit I want to sort of put together today, and it might go on a bit because it's quite dense. It is, I feel, giving communication strata, if you'll bear with me, much more gravitas than it's had before. Because putting together transparency, script lines, and straight messages, I think we're coming in behind the statement, which I think is a Christian statement, the truth will set you free. It's probably a combination of Christianity and the ancient Greeks. Yeah, you know, we are coming behind that statement with details and tools to say, yeah, the truth will set you free. Because as I've presented script lines here, recently, it's about, you know, this is a way of explaining who you are in the world. I think transparency is a way of saying, this is how I am as a human being working with you, who are my client, patient, or student. And I think that is the truth will set you free. Because taking a sort of critical stance, which I don't always want to do, but if you go back to Freud, and when his senior and brilliant students wanted to pursue something different, he couldn't handle it. You know, he sort of couldn't handle Jung and Fritz Perls and Adler, Bettelheim. And I'm not an expert on this by a long shot, but the sort of movement splintered, in my view, because they couldn't quite find the straight messages. You know, you're doing that, but I'm doing this. You know, I'm Carl Jung and I want to pursue something different. I'm Fritz Perls. I want to pursue something different. He couldn't handle it. And I think that's fairly accurate. And to look at it from 30,000 feet, it's a bit sort of silly, okay? I mean, you know, these were a bunch of ambitious, brilliant guys. You know, they're gonna go off in different directions. They're just not going to be subservient to him. Not the nature of the world. But I think it's arguable that he couldn't handle that, didn't have the tools to handle that. And, you know, David Pellin from the, you know, we've only got a tiny part of the truth, you know, to understand the difference between performance and rejectiveness or caring, you know, gave us the tools to do that. And I've come along with transparency and script lines. And then I want to go back to Janet Letterman's point, which is straight messages. And what a straight message is really quite simple. It's just truth. It's, you know, what is going on for me now and how can I say it in a straight message? And the background to that, which might have, you know, been not quite so relevant now, but a lot of situations in the helping professions lacked authenticity, and they were full of manipulation. And manipulation, almost by definition, is a mixed message rather than a straight message. And Janet was very clear that mixed messages do children a great deal of damage. You know, am I loved or not loved? I mean, she would say that a child could handle the straight message of not being loved. That's an extreme situation, okay? But the child could handle the straight message of, you're not the most important thing in my life, my job is. Now, how the straight message is delivered in a parental context, you know, of crucial importance. But, you know, how do you give a child a straight message that I'm an alcoholic? Not an alcoholic going to AA, but an alcoholic going to the bar. And I want to combine straight messages with, I don't think I've presented it much here, but it's the base of a lot of my work. And that is David's rather complex idea of self-identity, okay? When he first said it, I think it was one of the times I was like, wow, you know, no one's got it this way. And his concept of self-identity is the part of us that we cannot know. By definition, we can't know it. Other people can know it and we can't. And, you know, the examples are even here, because we're now accustomed to our own image and our own voice. Once that wasn't the case, you know, there'd be a record. Examples I used years and years ago were, you know, if there was a recording of a group of people that we were involved with having a meeting and the recording was played back, everyone's voice would be familiar except our own. That to me is the sort of classic case of self-identity. With Zoom and all of this, that those examples don't quite have the same strength they had once, but there's still a way we can know somebody else in ways that we cannot know ourselves, and other people can know us in ways we cannot know ourselves. No, I got that wrong. We can know other people in ways they cannot know themselves, and we can and other people at times can know us the way we don't know ourselves. I haven't taught self-identity that much, recent times, but way back at the beginning of Pellin, we used to have something called the self-identity feedback exercise. And what that was, one person would take a turn and that person would get feedback from everyone else in the group and passive listen to that. The self-identity feedback exercise is written up quite fully in the manual, CT manual, if someone wants to look at it. And that was really the development of the whole thing about feedback and hard feedback and passive listening to hard feedback. So the concept of self-identity, there are ways we sort of interact with the world, the ways we connect with people, communicate with people, the ways we talk, the ways we listen. They're the sort of classic things about self-identity. And the way he described it is, by nature, these are things we cannot know directly. And that to me is quite an amazing bit of theory. And, I developed hard feedback, and hard being defined as that which is hard for the person saying it to say, and hard for the person hearing it to let in. And that's, I think that's sort of cutting edge of our work. And because hard feedback's hard, we've got passive listening, and because passive listening needs to be understood in a wide context, we got 7 levels of listening. So passive listening is just one; it's not a be all or an end all. But I think there is something about a connection I want to put together here. Now, let me just stay with self-identity for a moment, because it's also saying something about David, which I've been writing about a lot, because that particular bit of writing, Me and Dave, Portrait of an Inspiration, is coming to an end in its first very rough form. So, I've been writing a lot and thinking about a lot about, Dave didn't defend something. Dave didn't, he didn't try to, in a way, he didn't put in the arguments that tried to convince us that this is a good idea to think about. He just announced things. It was very unusual. I feel a very unusual form of teaching, and yet he pulled it off. He just announced this. I know what I'm trying to say. He just announced this, that this is the case. And this is the case because I'm saying it. He didn't try to defend it or explain it or say where it came from. He just said, this is the case. And this is the pendulum, and this is the high, and this is the low, and this is the curve of the pendulum. It was very, so I can't quite find the right pronunciation of the word, but very much, he sort of disclaimed it. Disclaim in a different way. No, yeah, I've got the wrong word there. I got to check that one away. He just stated it. And there's an irony and something I've explored in the portrait, which aims to be a book. He was a born academic. He should have been standing up in a lecture room, teaching, 60 undergraduates the pendulum, okay, with whatever blackboard equivalents he needed to do that teaching. He would have been great at it. And of course, the irony is he couldn't get within, to use an Australian expression, he couldn't get within cooey of that, okay? Just couldn't get close. Anyway, I found that interesting to write about. Coming back to this, because I guess what I'm looking at here is the gravitas of communication strata. And that is seeing it a bit more seriously, because if the truth will let you free, then if the truth will let me free, then how do I express the truth? I guess there's something. First, I got to find the truth. Then how do I express the truth? And I think we can say in a lot of, and this is where Janet was a person of few words. She had an odd sort of charisma. Janet's way of starting a group or training lesson, she would just go in and sit there, okay? And it's funny to think of, and she would just sit there and still it was totally silent. She wouldn't sort of start. It was almost a little power trip. She would just sit there and people noticed her and kept talking, and she didn't start until there was total silence. So she sort of gained herself power. But she certainly wasn't transparent. And she didn't have the performance life, or she didn't have the ambition or the need for power that could have enabled her to take over the Gestalt movement, because Fritz Perls, when he died, gave it to her, the institution that he taught at the end. Janet inherited all of that, but she didn't have the skills to hold it together. And she tried to engage me in that, and I just didn't have the confidence. I couldn't overcome my own shyness. So her work is not recorded the way other people's work would be, but she also did something around listening, which was really the basis for passive listening. She had us do exercise about listening and not responding, listening and not being engaged. From her point of view, as listening and being in the here and now, just being in the here and now and listening from the here and now into the 7 levels of listening. And of course, she was very much a student of Fritz's, and Fritz was opposed to any analysis It was his rebellion against Freud. So therefore, any diagnosis or evaluation. So I sort of I brought diagnosis and evaluation back and made it the seventh level of listening. That's the sort of background of that struggle, which was pretty intense at one point. I lost touch with Janet. She was hard on me. I think she was disappointed in me. She wanted me to take over this organization, and I didn't have the skills. She told me, when she told a whole group of people, of which I was one, very early in the training process, about 20 people, we're all students. I might have said that here before, I don't know. And she said, there are two therapists here. I'm one and Peter's the other. And, my fellow students weren't very pleased for a while. But, she gave me a lot of confidence to develop a following around doing Gestalt therapy. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's an odd sort of thing that Fritz funded Dave. Gestalt therapy enabled Pellin to get off the ground and survive and do well and attract people and get paid for it, because I was good at Gestalt therapy. A little irony that I enjoy as I'm writing about the portrait of me and Dave. So that's a whole lot of background to this position I want to get into, that with the combination of transparency, script line, and straight messages, we are coming in behind this statement, the truth will set you free. And in doing that, we're giving communication strata a lot more value, and in a sense, developing Pellin values, where we're saying there's an intention. Nan. Oh, okay. Do you have to go? Anyway.
No, I was moving my screen so you couldn't see me eating.
Oh, okay.
Because I thought if I turn off my video, you might think I'm not here still.
Okay.
So, that's all.
Thanks.
That's transparency in action.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this to me has this importance. And I feel a newness, particularly, I think, in the world, in a number of places. The need for truth and the need to call out untruth, really, really big, really big. And I mean, I'm not sure about the next statement at all, but is it the case that the therapeutic field was not as strong as it could be because it was not in its interest to look at the issue of truth? Because if you come in behind truth, then I got to be truthful, okay? I can't teach you truth and not be truthful. Yet if I'm helping you with dire personal or emotional issues, And I have my own that I'm not being open about. I think that makes truth problematic. So it's not talked about. And I think it would be often a therapeutic point of view, well, we've all got our own truth, and just the same as we all have our own, in Pellin terms, memory links. So in our field of work, psychotherapy, we don't look at the question of truth just the same as we don't really look at the question of evil. And I feel that's not quite good enough. Yeah, just not quite good enough. And I don't think a solid base from which a large advance in human knowledge and human awareness, because there's another part of me that absolutely believes our field of work has huge contributions to make. But because I'm just saying here, question of truth and question of evil can't be addressed, we are not seen as people who would have the contribution we do have to make. You know, from Freud to, Woody Allen's Shrink, or Peter Sellers playing a shrink. The field can slightly be held up to ridicule. For years in the English medical profession, psychiatrists were, a certain amount of fondness. Anyway, they were called trick cyclists, okay? But it was a put down, it was a put down. And yet, in terms of the issues we look at, and including Freud, and the knowledge we have acquired, we got a whole bunch of stuff to contribute. Why did Hitler become Hitler, and why did Hitler appeal to a nation for a disastrous amount of time? And one of the people, when I was talking about the students of Freud, senior students of Freud, who couldn't sort of come together in a collegiate way. Another one was, what was his first name? His name was Reich, wasn't it? R-E-I-C-H, essentially the man who founded the body movement in psychotherapy. He went off on his own with a different tangent, and they sort of couldn't work together. Even the field could say, would have the knowledge to say, yeah, there are terms for this these days, aren't there? Alpha male. I guess there are a whole bunch of alpha males who had to compete with each other to the death almost. Your theory is rubbish. Mine's the only one that should be taken forward. And within this whole, I would here say almost conundrum of not being able to accept that we only have a tiny part of the whole truth. We cannot have more. I slightly lost my train of thought, sorry. Anyway, they couldn't come together. And within that, what we, and I'm taking a sort of slightly different stance on a bunch of magnificent men and women who are at the forefront of, the development of human knowledge, founded by Freud, a great mind. They couldn't get to the point, hey, we've got a lot to say to you guys who create wars or don't care if the planet dies or commit domestic and sexual abuse. And what would have been like if this group of people could have influenced and penetrated the Catholic Church and just got them thinking differently. I mean, that would have saved lives. So, coming back to our little bit of the truth, Scriptlines enables us to stand in the world. This is who I am. I probably need a script line about my work and how it fits in. I'm not a conventionally qualified psychotherapist. I come from a different background. Years as a counselor and social worker and trainer and psychotherapist, but from an unusual background. And then a script line about Dave. And that's how I stand in the world. Because the truth will set you free has to be about being truthful in the world. And it's bringing truth. As you know, I go to my philosophy club, right? Where, there's massive debate. I don't know all the academic stuff, okay? Massive debate about what is truth and can there be truth, and Kant and Hume and Locke and a whole lot of philosophers. And, I get a lot from that. But so, if the truth will set you free, then the script line gives you a way to your truth. And transparency means a question, at least, of how much will I share of this with the world. And straight messages means we gotta hone it down to a straight message that is not a mixed message, there's not a manipulation because I want to be heard and loved, but is simply, this is the situation. I guess if I could give an example for myself. Well, one example is, this is the situation. I'm in, a couple of weeks, I'll be 88. That's one straight message. Yeah, I guess there's a straight message. In a couple of weeks, I'll be 88. And how am I going, with the time I've got left, how am I going to make this material strong and available in the world? But going back to Janet, the straight message would be, in a couple of weeks, I'll be 88. She was very influential with the people she was right there with at the moment. But she didn't quite, yes, I can see it now. She was very much a student and disciple of Fritz Perls, and you weren't allowed, which is a bit sad, you weren't allowed to develop theories. You know, Perls developed the phrases elephant shit and mind fucking, mental masturbation. You know, you just got to be in touch with your feelings. So Janet, in a sense, was in this sort of, I don't know, constrained situation. I think she would have liked her to develop theory, but it was not what Fritz Perls was about at all. I mean, and again, what we have to offer in the field, I mean, his competition with Freud was so great. You know, he got out, he went to South Africa. Got out, I mean, he saw the Holocaust coming and left Germany quite early and went to South Africa, where he was very successful, including he learned to fly. So at one point, he rather dramatically flew his own plane to Europe to visit with Freud and to tell Freud how he developed his work, because he had, for a time, being a student of Freud, Freud didn't want to meet with him and didn't. Okay.
Peter?
Yeah.
Can I just say that I was really interested to hear about how straight messages and script lines fitted together and were relevant to, you know, as part of communication strata. And you just looked like you were going to do it. And then you went back into the history. So I just
Okay. No, thank you for that, Mary. Well, I think the honest answer is I don't know yet. Okay, it's new. This is really new. But yes, I think there's a way that the bottom line for the base for us is transparency. Cynthia.
Yeah, I'm going to go a little bit along with what Mary was saying and stuff. You know, all the history, I mean, some of it's interesting, but I don't, this is not my field. So a lot of that's going over my head. And what you've mentioned about straight messaging and the self-identifying, to be honest, a lot of that sounds just terrifying. I mean, and I don't have any, I mean, I understand to a certain extent, but, you know, people necessarily telling you what, I don't know. Especially when you're talking about what do you mean by straight? I mean, the truth, it's very vague. What is it? What are you? I mean, I don't know. Sorry, I don't mean to.
No, that's really useful. And I love the questions and the challenge. Although at times they're a little bit painful, but that doesn't mean don't do them. I think in going into the bits of history, I think I was quite aware it was being recorded. I wanted this down there, okay? So, you know, just bear with me about that. I think in terms of your response, I think that's right. I think it's terrifying, and that's why people don't do it. And from odd combination of two men, you know, from Sigmund Freud to Donald Trump, they're scared to death of the truth. And they cannot in any way believe that the truth will set you free. That's where I think the truth will set you free is a religious statement. And so what it is the if I can answer the question, our base is transparency. And our base about transparency is also knowing who we are, okay? And that, in many ways, Cynthia, is the first point of fear. And, you know, people in the performance life force are scared to death of finding out who they are. Because, sorry, go.
It's that wasn't what sounds scary about it. I'm thinking about somebody as someone who you know, if you've been abused, if you've been in situations where you've been powerless, if you're in a situation where you know, you've been picked on at school all the time. I mean, you know, I mean, you know, to me, self-abuse would just be having to sit there and listen to people pick on you and make fun of you. You know, I mean, that's, oh dear. Well, I said I was going to try practicing being more truthful and being more open. So I guess but I think that's, and it's different if you're a person in power. I mean, I guess they're afraid of things too, but, you know, I think if you're not in power, you know, or I think, yeah, I think it depends on, you know, you don't have as many choices. And I'm also thinking about, like, with manipulation, and one of the things that I've seen used, because I was actually in a church that believed in what was it, direct, I forget the name of it, but you were supposed to, they use the teachings of the Bible, that you were supposed to go to the person with whom you were having a trouble first before you did anything else. You were first to, oh gosh, what did they call? I don't remember. It was a long time ago. But, you know, to me, then it just turned out the person who could yell the loudest, or the person who was in the strongest position of power, could then use it as excuse to say, well, they didn't say anything about it to me. Well, you know, I mean, I think that it's I don't know. I just, so I'm sorry, I'm putting something in there, but you know, and this is just my own memory links too, probably. But
Oh no, that's no. What you're saying is crucial, Mary.
Well, I was just going to say to Cynthia that inside Pellin, the background of any hard feedback or self-identity feedback is assuming this is on an assumption of goodwill. None of this is about in a hostile situation like you described. Obviously, your memory links kind of override things. You know, your memory links of hostile situations override and trigger when you hear about this. But it is inside a very specific, when we're teaching it, it's inside a very specific setting that's primarily caring life force with goodwill.
yeah, yes, and I think that's why we should have explained it a little more, because with the little bit you explained and then all this other stuff, I'm like,
Well, yeah, I guess the thing is, and I think it is related to straight messages, scriptline, and transparency. I guess what we build up is trust, okay? And also what we build up is, you know, it's in the ground rules. No, you know, someone can say no. Someone who I work with intensely said no to me the other day. No, I don't want to pursue the path of transparency. Not what I want to do. What I've been doing all my life works for me. Fine. You know, that's a no. It's absolutely in Pellin. That's a no. And we are schooled that we don't mess with no's, okay? And that's why I say in the ground rules, no is no, we don't analyze it. No, this would work for me. I don't want to do that other thing. But in terms of the point you're bringing up, it's, in a way, it's evaluation strata, evaluation strata, evaluation strata. You know, pendulum. You know, because what I'm presenting here is something of an ideal. I'm still struggling with it. I guess I want it in a way to be a challenge to those in power, but not in any way even an invitation to those who don't have power. Yeah, and I think I want to repeat that, not even an invitation. You know, someone can do that when they're ready for it. And maybe never, as the person told me recently. Look, you know, I'm not transparent. I compartmentalize things. You know, at my age, I don't want to change that. Okay. But so
let me just say this real quick. To me, self-knowledge or self-identity awareness gives me the freedom to be transparent, but and my script line is partly how I communicate my truth, but my evaluation strata protects me and the other person. So I do think they all go hand in hand, but without my ability to tolerate self-knowledge or self-awareness, I don't have that choice, because I have parts of myself that are locked away from me, which means I couldn't be transparent about them if I wanted to. So I think that's the discipline part that goes with transparency. That, and like Mary said, it comes, or you said, in Pellin, it comes always from a caring life force. So I don't think you need to evaluate in the same way. But in our everyday lives, I think evaluation strata is important.
Oh, well, evaluation strata is always the bottom line. Just the same as safety is always the first priority. And I used to say, and I'd say it sort of routinely, and, you know, a little bit, you know, a little bit it was sort of a joke or something. But I would say our first priority is safety. A second priority is safety. A third priority is safety. If someone gets something out of it, that's great. That's their fourth priority. And I think, you know, given, because, yeah, I think we really established that. You know, people can say, I don't want to work on that. I don't want to be transparent. I don't like that part of Pellin. I don't like chair work. I want to do work with you, but I don't want to use two chairs. Whole lot of stuff. And I think, we go back a long way. And I got sent photographs recently of literally Pellin almost 50 years ago. Okay. You know, so we got that long history, but I think the way we're moving it and the way we're moving the stuff about communication strata, I think we can make it, I think what's happening here, which, as you know, at times I don't get the order of my sentences correct, okay? So I need to put in some of the safety factors, some of the, you know, there is no pressure on anyone about this. It's just something you might want to think about. I think I need to put those things in first, rather than go off onto the theory. And then when I get into the theory, I want to challenge thinkers in my field. But that's, as you said, that's not relevant to a whole lot of people. So I think for me, it's sort of ordering my sentences, ordering my paragraphs, okay? But so I guess if I get the sentences right, there are important things here. You know, some of them, for some people, might not work because it would make them too vulnerable. Some people might want to think about it, but use it later. But what we're looking at is the possibility that truth will set you free. But yeah, truth will set you free, but you got to survive first. And yeah, Cynthia.
Well, and you know, and like I said, I've been in, you know, the situations, you know, I mean, some of it I'm talking about the old memory links from the past, but you know, there is sort of the question though about what is true, you know, I mean, you know, I could, and there's a certain thing, and it is probably important for me to do it is you know what, a lot of times, at least I've seen a lot of times, people think, oh, the truth, if you're saying the truth, if you're saying a message, it's something negative, and you might have mixed feelings, like you know, I had a lot of mixed feelings, like, well, that's interesting, and I do, you know, I mean, there's things are not always so straightforward. I mean, if I was going to say what I was honestly thinking with all the stuff, you know, I mean, yes, there's the part about, you know, going over my head. There's the memory links of being terrified. There's the, well, you know, I know he's putting this out, and I like him a lot, and I don't want to seem critical. You know, I mean, all of those are real. You know, I mean, it's not, you know. And sometimes the truth is actually positive, or it's complicated, you know, like, well, you know, or sometimes we say, oh, not doing, because you're like, well, maybe that is the truth. Maybe the reason you're involved in this is because you happen to enjoy being with the person. And you know, and you're just sort of making up things to say so that you're, you know, you're just keeping a conversation going because you like the contact. I mean, there's so many, I don't know, like, it's interesting because I go back to Precure. Sorry, it might be a little silly, but you know, one of the things, this is where the girl, it's a Japanese anime where the girl, where these they're usually junior high school girls will basically transform and fight these monsters. And when they're, and one of the things that's really interesting, but they always have to do this philosophical speech. You can, I mean, it's not just, you know, it's not just, I mean, there's actually a lot of deep stuff in these, in a very, but one of the things is they're often told to say what they really feel. And a lot of times, you know, in Western concepts, you assume it's going to be something negative and critical. But in their concept, there's like, yes, I'm afraid. Yes, yes, I made a mistake in this, but this is what I want to do now. Or, you know, I really care about you and I really believe in you. Or I really believe that, you know, there's one, she was kind of student council president, which is really big in Japan, you know, much more, you know, than in the United States. And, you know, and she was running for it, and she was running, you know, on the platform. She wanted people to, you know, we wanted to clean the schools, water the flowers, and all this other stuff. And, you know, the opponents were actually the bad guys, saying, you know, no homework, you know, you eat snacks. And one of the things she says, but, you know, if we take care of the flowers, we're going to have a pretty school. If we all do this, we're going to care about each other. And eventually people understood, because she kept putting it out there. I mean, and at first, like, everybody was like, you know, and it was going nowhere. But I mean, there's this thing about your true feelings are often the caring ones. I mean, even if you're conflicted, I don't know.
Yeah, I guess I mean, what you're saying is the self-knowledge that comes from the therapeutic process, in a way. Whatever, and that's my therapeutic process, is my word. Other people will have other ways of saying that. You know, really knowing who you are, or really knowing what's going on with your relation with your mum and be honest about it, you know, I mean, or really know what's going on with your relationship with your daughter and be honest about it. You know, people will have different ways of putting a descriptive label on that activity. And, you know, one of the places where my thinking is going, if I can just digress for a little minute, you know, when in my field of work, a new description of a new mental health condition comes up, post-traumatic stress disorder, and then given a set of initials, it's almost as if it had not happened before that category was described. And I'm saying there was post-traumatic stress disorder in the Trojan Wars, and someone helped some people come through it. So, yeah, and maybe there's a little bit behind wanting to get this stuff about script lines, transparency, and straight messages, because I think it's very practical. So I can say, you know, the practical things has happened before. I'm sorry, that's a huge digression. I shouldn't have gone there. But yeah, mental health, but I'm still saying there, aren't I? Staying there. Mental health, mental illness did not start in people, human condition, just when psychiatry or psychotherapy came along. It has been there from the beginning. That's my contention. So how do we look at that? And of course, that, for me, relates to foster carers, okay? It relates to people who work in substance abuse with magnificence. Anyway, so, you know, that's sort of background to this, okay? Background of my struggle. Because I feel I've got a responsibility to get at that, because I've been, you know, privileged to work in the field for longer than anybody. You know, it's an odd sort of responsibility. And that's where, you know, okay, we're going to make something different of the communication strata, okay? And then I can say, and it's practical. And at times we'll be scared to death. And then that's really useful to look at, because that's just time to say, oh, I don't want to go there now. You know, that feels too scary. I don't want to go there, and that's fine. So I think if we come down on the practicality of it, which is always my claim for Pellin, then I think we're straight into what's going to work for somebody, small steps, evaluation strata. You know, if there's no caring, as Mary was saying, you know, if there's no caring life force around, Mary put it a slightly different way, there's no goodwill around. We are not going to do this exercise. You know, what is called the self-identity feedback exercise, that is done when a group of people trust each other and want to do it. If a group does not have that condition, and it might not have that condition just because of one person, then we don't do it. Just that simple. We don't do it. And you know, that's the sort of Pellin. We don't put it in the ground rules of the forum, but it's certainly in the virtual Pellin Italy program. The most important person is the most vulnerable person. So, we've got a program about what we're going to do, blah, blah, blah. But if someone's got another need, well, that's just chucked out the window. I think that's just understood. And again, it's me, and in a little bit, as we move forward, Nikki, I feel there's a little bit sort of your responsibility, director of ethos, and not making mistakes. That's Nikki's formal position in Pellin, which she'll never tell anybody, so I have to. I've got to get the sequence of my paragraphs and sentences right. Otherwise, I set up these misunderstandings. And that's a part of me. I've had that tendency forever. That's nothing to do with my age at all. And I guess if we take communication strata and transparency and script lines and straight messages, then the priority of not setting up misunderstandings is a very big one, isn't it? Just sort of common sense. We don't want to set up misunderstandings. So when I start going in a direction, and I think it happens here, when I start going on a direction that misunderstandings could happen, someone says, hey, Peter, let's go back to this.
I was just going to say, in case we don't look specifically at straight messages again, was there some way Janet Lederman taught about straight messages? Like what? I feel you haven't given us much kind of underpinning.
No, I haven't. And I've got to spend more time on it. So I want to stay in this theme in a different way, including next Sunday, and stay with straight messages. I've just got to, go into my memory and visit something that was literally more than 50 years ago. Janet mainly talked about it in terms of what it was not, okay? So it was not mixed messages. It was not manipulation. It was not having a hidden agenda. They were the sort of things about it. A bit like David and some of his work, she didn't make as much of it as she could have. And I think that's, that's where the history does come in. Because I think she was perhaps too much under Fritz Perl's shadow. So she starts getting intellectual and theoretical, and you're not allowed to do that. So a little bit it came out more of what it was not rather than what it is. And that, the stuff bringing in the truth will set you free and making a bigger thing about it, that's mine. That wasn't hers.
Can I just ask a practical question? Just because in terms of what I should title it when the visit, should I, instead of saying, because we talked a little bit about, should I say it's more background and history?
Could you go back over that again? Just hold on half a minute.
Okay.
My phone has decided to turn itself on and then bring in this person who wants to talk to me, and I can't handle that. I can't handle. Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
No problem. No, I just have a question in terms of how I should describe the video for when I post it. Should I describe it as the background and history behind it?
Yeah, that would. Thank you, Cynthia. That would be really good. Yes.
Okay.
And then I put that down. So next Sunday we're going to continue with this in a more practical and operative way. And I'm just not actively familiar with this to be able to do it without the history. So this was the history. It's in the title. Thank you very much. Yep. To answer your question, Mary, going back and thinking about it, it was like, what's really going on for you, okay? What's really going on for you in this situation. And I can't remember her taking it outside of a parent-child relationship. That's where she taught it from, okay? And a teacher-child relationship. So, you know, what's really going on for you? What do you really think about the situation? What do you really think about the child? How can you give the child a really straight message around it? Okay. And she did. A tough lady, really tough lady. She did say at times it's going to be hard. You know, she did say at times delivering the straight message to the child is going to be hard, but it's the best thing you can do for the child. And I guess she was saying that as a teacher, and then as a therapist who worked with children. She wasn't saying that as a parent. And she said, I'm not saying this, so I'm not a parent. She was gay. I'm not a parent. I'm not gonna, I'm not coming from that side. I'm not suggesting this as a parent or as a mother. I'm suggesting this as my view of how children grow up really healthy. And I view that, my view is they grow up really healthy because they get straight messages. Janet almost had a natural sense of our truth line more than Fritz Perls did. You know, she'd say, well, this is my approach. Other people are going to have a different one. But in my experience as a therapist and over the years since I studied with her, I've seen that, and I'm not alone here, I've seen that over and over again. Just it's almost people who haven't gone through that rougher child. One of the things that straight messages describes to me is how the people who went through a very rough childhood, you know, father was an alcoholic and physically violent, at times come through with an easier passage than someone who had a very subtle mixture of mixed messages. And over again, I've seen the power of Janet's thing about straight messages.
That's interesting, because that reminds me of Al-Anon and therefore AA about, what was this? Yeah, about the way forward out of secrets and the denial that's rampant in Al-Anon people as well as alcoholics. It's like straight messages to yourself.
Yeah.
And to people around you. I do think the most amazing examples of transparency I've seen have come from Al-Anon meetings.
Yeah.
And that kind of sharing.
Yeah, and when you say that, just thinking back, because it was a very intense and development time in my life. Okay, it really was. But as you said that, if I learned that Janet once had been an alcoholic and had gone to meetings, I wouldn't have been surprised, okay? I would have been shocked, but I wouldn't have been surprised. I mean, she never said anything like that. That's absolute speculation on my part. But as I think it through, there's something about the way she came in with a lot of sensitivity that Fritz Perls couldn't approach, didn't have. Cynthia.
I know we're near the end, but I was thinking about something, and some of the thing that I was thinking about would had to do with cultural differences, because English is actually a very direct language in terms of cultures, and I say Japanese is indirect. But I think that, but I still think it had. But then I thought, well, you know what though, if everybody's speaking the same language, they don't all understand. Like for you don't. It's not like there's denial or anything. There's just conventions of how things are communicated. Like for example, in Japanese, if you can't make it at a certain time, as some proposes a time, you don't directly say, oh no, I can't make it. You just say sort of choto, which is a little, which kind of means a little inconvenient, but the other person knows that's what you mean. I mean, I think that's the whole, I think those kind of indirect is not necessarily, I think, I guess that would be combining that with, it's not like you're not giving a mixed message, because everybody knows what's being said. It's just you have a different way of saying it. I mean, I don't know. And so just, anyways, sorry.
Okay. Well, we gotta stop there for today. I'm in Norfolk, England, and it's beginning to get dark at 7:30 or so in the evening. That's me. Nikki will go east-west.
Hi, I'm still in Wimbledon, same time.
Yeah. Cecilia?
Cease, I'm in Tampa, 2:35 p.m. in the afternoon.
Okay. Nan?
I'm Nan, I'm in Cincinnati, same time as Tampa.
Okay. Cynthia?
Cynthia, I'm in Kankakee, Illinois, and it is about a little after 1:30.
Yeah. Mary?
Mary in Rosarito Beach, a little after 11:30.
Okay. Well, again, thank you very much for coming.
Can I say something real quick?
Sure.
This is funny. Cynthia, I know when you put on the when you go on where you're recording it and there's a message come on, I always thought that was your voice. And then I was on another Zoom call and it was the same voice. And I thought, wow, they've got Cynthia here. What's she, and then I realized.
Oh, I love that.
That's what Zoom uses.
That's great. That's great.
Oh, that's lovely. I love that. Thank you, Cease.
Okay. All right.
Okay. And see you
Good
all.
week.
Yeah. See you all soon.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.